I, 60, lost my wife, Sarah, 1 year ago. The silence in our house has been the hardest part. Every room holds a memory, every object a story. We were married for 40 years, a lifetime of shared jokes and quiet understanding. Her absence is a physical weight, a constant pressure on my chest. In the months after she passed, our son, Mark, and his wife, Jenna, 32F, started coming over more often. They said it was to help me. They wanted to help me sort through Sarah's things, to declutter the house, as Jenna put it. I knew they meant well, or at least I told myself they did. Mark is my son, and I love him, but he has always been easily led by a stronger personality. Jenna is that stronger personality. She has a way of making her opinions sound like facts. She would walk through our home, a place filled with 4 decades of our life together, and see only outdated furniture and old-fashioned trinkets. She never understood the sentimental value of things. To her, an item's worth was its price tag, nothing more. I tried to explain it once, when she suggested we sell Sarah's old oak dresser. I told her that Sarah's father had made it for her as a wedding gift. Jenna had just smiled a tight, polite smile and said, it would fetch a great price with an antique dealer. We could put that money toward updating the kitchen. I changed the subject. It was easier than arguing. It was easier than feeling that fresh stab of grief, mixed with frustration. But then, something went missing that I could not ignore. It was Sarah's wedding ring. It was a simple gold band with a small, modest diamond. It was all we could afford when we were young, but to Sarah, it was more precious than the biggest diamond in the world. She never took it off. After she passed, the nurse at the hospital gave it to me in a small envelope. I took it home and placed it carefully in the velvet-lined jewelry box on her dresser, right next to her favorite pearl earrings. I would open that box sometimes just to look at it, just to touch the cool metal and remember the day I slipped it onto her finger. About 2 months ago, I went to open the box and the ring was gone. The space where it always sat was empty. I felt a cold panic rise in my throat. I searched the entire bedroom. I emptied the jewelry box. I looked under the bed, behind the dresser, in every drawer. It was nowhere. I told myself it must have been misplaced. I told myself I must have moved it and forgotten. But a small, dark suspicion began to grow in the back of my mind. Jenna had been helping me organize that very room just a week before I noticed it was gone. I decided to ask them about it. I waited until the next Sunday, when they came over for dinner. I tried to sound casual, not accusatory. I did not want to cause a fight. I just wanted the ring back. We were sitting at the dinner table, the same table where Sarah and I had shared thousands of meals. The silence felt heavier than usual. Mark, have you by any chance seen your mother's wedding ring? I asked, looking at my son. Mark froze, a forkful of mashed potatoes halfway to his mouth. He glanced nervously at Jenna. It was a fleeting look, but I saw it. It was the look of a child checking with a parent for the right answer. Jenna put her napkin down and gave me a patient, slightly pitying smile. Oh, Thomas, she said, using my first name in a way that always felt a little condescending. I'm sure it's around here somewhere. Things get misplaced when you're doing a big clean-out. I have looked everywhere, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It was in her jewelry box. Now it is not. Well, we moved a lot of boxes into the spare room, she offered, waving her hand dismissively. It's probably tucked away in one of them. We'll find it eventually. There is no need to worry. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to say something, to back me up, to show some concern. He just shifted in his chair and started eating again. Yeah, Dad, he mumbled. Jenna's right. It'll turn up. My stomach felt like it was full of stones. I knew Sarah. She was the most organized person I had ever met. She never misplaced anything of value, especially not her wedding ring. And I knew that I had not moved it. The conversation ended there, but the sick feeling did not go away. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they were lying. I just did not know why. That night, I could not sleep. I kept seeing the empty space in the velvet box. The symbol of my entire marriage vanished. It felt like losing her all over again. The weeks that followed were strained. Mark and Jenna still came over, but their helpfulness now felt intrusive. Every time Jenna would pick up an object and ask, "Do you really need to keep this?" I would feel a surge of anger. I started saying no to their offers to help organize. I told them I needed some time to do it myself. They seemed relieved, which only deepened my suspicion. They were not helping me grieve. They were circling, waiting. But for what?
The question haunted me.
My grief for Sarah was a deep, quiet ocean. Most days I could float on the surface, remembering the good times. But the missing ring was a hook, pulling me down into the cold, dark depths. It was a constant reminder of not just her absence, but of a new, creeping betrayal that I could not yet prove. I felt utterly alone. Sarah had been my confidant, the one person I could tell anything to. Now, the person I should have been able to lean on, my own son, felt like a stranger. He was more his wife's husband than he was my son, and the realization was a bitter pill to swallow. I decided I had to find out what happened. I could not let it go. It was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of my life. It was a piece of Sarah. And I would get it back. I just needed to figure out how. The first step was to stop pretending that I believed their story. The next time they came over, I had to try again, to push a little harder, to see if their story would hold up under the slightest pressure. I owed it to Sarah's memory to not let this be swept under the rug like some misplaced knick-knack. The following weekend, they arrived with a casserole, all smiles and cheer. Jenna was talking about her plans to redecorate their guest room, turning it into a home office for herself. She talked about new desks and ergonomic chairs, her voice full of excitement. I let her talk, waiting for the right moment. Mark just nodded along, agreeing with everything she said. He looked tired, I noticed. There were dark circles under his eyes. After we ate, I cleared my throat. "Jenna," I started, trying to keep my tone even. "I spent all of last week going through every single box in the spare room. I opened each one. I unpacked them. I checked every pocket of every old coat. The ring is not there." Jenna's smile tightened. "Thomas, I really think you are getting yourself worked up over nothing," she said smoothly. "It could be anywhere. It might have fallen behind the dresser years ago, for all we know." "It did not," I said. "I put it in the jewelry box myself. It was there for months. It disappeared after you two cleaned the bedroom. That is a fact." Mark finally spoke up, his voice sharp. "Dad, what are you trying to say? Are you accusing us of something?" The direct question hung in the air. This was my chance to back down, to keep the peace. But the image of Sarah's face on our wedding day flashed in my mind. I could not back down. "I am saying that the ring is missing, and it went missing after you were the only other people in that room," I stated plainly. Jenna let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound of disbelief, but it felt practiced. "Oh, for goodness sake," she said, standing up and collecting the plates. "This is ridiculous. We were trying to help you. We spent hours cleaning up this dusty old house. And this is the thanks we get? You accuse us of stealing?" "I did not use the word stealing," I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "I am just stating the facts. The ring is gone." "Well, we do not have it," she snapped, turning to face me from the kitchen doorway. Her eyes were hard. "Mark, are you going to let your father talk to me like this?" Mark looked from me to her, his face a mask of conflict. He looked miserable. "Dad, please," he said, his voice pleading. "Just drop it. We don't know where it is. We'll help you look again if you want." I felt a profound sense of disappointment. He was choosing her. He was choosing the easy path, the path of no conflict, even if it meant ignoring the truth. I knew then that I would get no help from my son. If I was going to find out what happened to Sarah's ring, I was on my own. I had to be smarter. A direct confrontation was a dead end. They would just deny, deny, deny. I needed proof. Something they could not argue their way out of. The seed of the idea came to me a few days later. I was dealing with a pile of mail that had accumulated on the dining table. Bills, junk mail, and a few bank statements. I usually just filed them away, but something made me open one. It was a joint account statement for Mark and Jenna that had been accidentally sent to my address. It happened sometimes since they had lived with me for a short while after they got married. I was about to put it in an envelope to give to them when a line item caught my eye. It was a deposit, not a withdrawal. The source was listed as Gold Standard Jewelers. The amount was for several $100s. It was not a fortune, but it was a significant sum. A quick search on my computer told me that Gold Standard Jewelers was one of the largest and most well-known pawn shops and jewelry buyers in the city. They had a reputation for paying fair prices for gold and diamonds. My heart started to pound in my chest. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The timing was right. The deposit was made just a few days after I first noticed the ring was missing. The amount seemed about right for what the gold weight and the small diamond would be worth if melted down or resold. It was all circumstantial, of course. It was not definitive proof. But in my gut, I knew. This was it. This was where the ring went. I felt a wave of nausea. The thought of Jenna walking into a pawn shop and sliding my wife's ring across the counter to a stranger was sickening. The thought of her taking money for it, money that was now sitting in their bank account, money they were probably using to buy new furniture for their guest room, filled me with a cold, hard rage I had not felt in years. My grief was suddenly eclipsed by this burning anger. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a misplaced item. This was a deliberate act of theft and disrespect. I had to be careful. I could not just call them and scream accusations over the phone. That would give them time to invent a new lie, a new story to explain the money. I needed to be strategic. I needed to approach this from an angle they would not expect. I decided to call my son, but not about the ring. I would ask him about the money. I would play dumb, just a curious old father looking at some financial records. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. I took a deep breath to steady my voice. He answered on the second ring.
Hey, Dad.
What's up? Hello, Mark, I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. I was just going through some old paperwork here for the taxes, you know. I came across one of your bank statements that got sent here by mistake. I noticed a deposit from a place called Gold Standard Jewelers. I did not recognize the name. What was that for? There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was only for a second, but it felt like an eternity. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Oh, that, he said, his voice a little too high, a little too quick. Yeah, that was nothing. Jenna just sold some old jewelry she never wears anymore. You know, just clearing out some clutter. Clearing out clutter. The same phrase she had used for my house, for Sarah's belongings. The lie was so blatant, so transparent, it was almost insulting. Jenna did not have any old gold jewelry. I knew this for a fact. Her own mother had complained to me once that Jenna only wore trendy, costume jewelry. She did not own anything of real value. Ah, I see, I said, keeping my voice level. Just cleaning out. Makes sense. Yeah, exactly, he said, sounding relieved that I had accepted the explanation. Anyway, I gotta run. Jenna and I are heading out. Talk to you later, Dad. Goodbye, Mark, I said and hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of my empty house, the receiver still cold in my hand. The light echoed in my ears. He had not even hesitated. He had covered for her without a second thought. The betrayal was now twofold. It was Jenna's greed and disrespect, and it was my son's weakness and complicity. They were a team, and I was on the outside. The anger was still there, burning cold and steady. But now something else was there too. Resolve. I was no longer just a grieving husband looking for a lost memento. I was a father who had been lied to and a husband whose wife's memory had been desecrated. This was not going to end with a simple apology. This was not going to be forgotten. I was going to get that ring back. And then I was going to make them understand the true cost of what they had done. The price they would have to pay would be far more than a few $100s. My next step was clear. I had to go to the pawn shop. I had to confirm, without a shadow of a doubt, that it was Sarah's ring they had sold. The thought of walking into such a place made me feel ill, but it was a necessary evil. I needed to see it with my own eyes, or at least hear it from the person who had bought it. I looked up the address for Gold Standard Jewelers. It was downtown in a part of the city I rarely visited. I got my car keys, my heart a heavy lump in my chest. This was real. I was really doing this. The drive downtown felt surreal. The city was bustling with life, people going about their days, completely unaware of the quiet, personal tragedy that was consuming me. I found the shop easily. It had a large, garish sign and barred windows. It looked exactly as I had imagined. I took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy glass door. A small bell chimed above my head. The inside was cluttered with all manner of things. Glass cases filled with jewelry, shelves lined with electronics, musical instruments hanging on the walls. It smelled of dust and old paper. A man stood behind the counter. He was older than me, with a kind, weary face and glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up from the newspaper he was reading. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gentle. For a moment, I could not speak. The reality of what I was doing, where I was, hit me with full force. I was standing in a pawn shop, about to ask a stranger if he had bought my dead wife's wedding ring for my daughter-in-law. It was the stuff of nightmares. "I hope so," I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse. I cleared my throat. "I am looking for a piece of jewelry. A ring. It might have been sold here a couple of months ago." He leaned on the counter, giving me his full attention. "All right," he said patiently. "We get a lot of rings. Can you describe it for me?" "It was a simple gold band," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "It had a small diamond, set in a four-prong setting. It was a little worn, a little scratched. It was worn for 40 years. The man's expression softened with a hint of sympathy. "A wedding ring," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I confirmed. "My wife's wedding ring. She passed away recently." He nodded slowly. "I am very sorry for your loss. Do you remember who might have sold it?" This was the hard part. I did not want to drag my family's name through the mud, but I had no choice. "I believe it was my daughter-in-law," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. A woman in her early 30s. Slim, with long brown hair. The man's eyes flickered with recognition.
I saw it.
He remembered. "I think I do recall a transaction like that," he said carefully. "A young woman came in. She said it was her grandmother's ring, and she needed the money for medical bills. I remember feeling a bit sorry for her. The lie was so cruel, so calculated. She had used a story of sickness and need to sell a symbol of love and commitment. It made my blood run cold. She had not just sold a ring. She had sold a story, a false narrative of hardship to mask her own selfish greed." "Was there anything else about the ring?" the man asked gently, pulling me from my dark thoughts. "Any distinguishing marks? An inscription, perhaps?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. There was an inscription on the inside of the band. It said S and T forever. The man's face fell. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Yes," he said, his voice full of regret. "I remember that inscription. S and T, Sarah and Thomas." I just nodded, unable to speak. The confirmation felt like a physical blow. It was true. It was all true. Jenna had taken the ring, invented a sob story, and sold it for cash. "Do you still have it?" asked, my voice pleading. "Is it here? Can I buy it back?" He shook his head slowly, and my heart sank into my shoes. "I am so sorry," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "I sold it last week. It was a beautiful, classic piece, even if it was simple. A collector who specializes in vintage wedding jewelry bought it. He buys from me regularly." Despair washed over me. I was too late. It was gone again, passed on to someone else, just another item in a collection. It felt like I had failed Sarah. I had let her most precious possession slip through my fingers. "Please," I said, leaning on the counter, feeling weak. "You have to help me. I need to get it back. Can you give me his name? His contact information?" The shop owner hesitated. "I am not really supposed to give out my client's information," he said, looking uncomfortable. "It's a matter of privacy." "I understand," I said, my voice cracking. "But this is not about a business transaction. This is about my wife." My life. 40 years.
Please.
I will pay you for your trouble. I will pay the collector whatever he wants. The money does not matter. I just need the ring back. I must have looked as desperate as I felt. The man looked at me for a long moment, his kind eyes searching my face. He saw the grief, the anger, the desperation. He saw the truth. All right, he said finally, making a decision. He turned to a large, old-fashioned ledger on the desk behind him and began flipping through the pages. Let me see what I can do. The man's name is Arthur Vance. He is a good man, an honest collector. I think if you explain the situation to him, he will understand. He wrote down a name and a phone number on a small piece of paper and slid it across the counter to me. I took the paper, my hand shaking. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I do, he said softly. I have been married for 45 years myself. Good luck, sir. I walked out of the pawn shop and back into the bright afternoon sun, clutching the small piece of paper in my hand.
It felt like a lifeline.
I had a name. I had a number. I had a chance. The despair I had felt just moments before was replaced by a sliver of hope. It was a long shot, I knew. This Arthur Vance had no obligation to me. He had bought the ring fair and square. But I had to try. I drove home, the piece of paper sitting on the passenger seat next to me, a tiny beacon in the overwhelming darkness of my situation. When I got home, I immediately called my best friend, David. David and I had known each other since college. He had been the best man at my wedding. He had held my hand at Sarah's funeral. He was the one person I could talk to about this without feeling judged. I told him everything. I told him about the missing ring, the bank statement, my son's lie, and my visit to the pawn shop. I read him the name and number on the piece of paper. David was silent for a moment after I finished. Then he exploded. That little witch, he roared into the phone. I knew there was something I never liked about her. And Mark.
How could he let her do that?
How could he lie to you like that, Tom? It's despicable. His anger was a strange comfort. It validated my own feelings. It made me feel less alone. I know, David, I said wearily. I know. So, what are you going to do? He asked, his voice still simmering. Are you going to call this collector? Are you going to confront Mark and Jenna? I am going to call the collector first, I said. There is no point in a confrontation until I have the ring back in my hand. It will just be my word against hers. Mark will defend her. They will call me a confused old man who is lost in his grief. I need the ring. The ring is the proof. You are right, David said, his voice calming down. You have to be smart about this. Get the ring first. Then you can bring the hammer down. That is the plan, I said. I just hope this Mr. Vance is a reasonable man. If he is not, David said grimly, we will make him reasonable. I will come over there with you if you want. I smiled for the first time in days. Thanks, David. I will let you know. I think I need to make this call alone first. We talked for a little while longer, and by the time I hung up, I felt stronger. David's unwavering support had bolstered my resolve. I was not just fighting for a memory anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for the respect that was due to me and to my late wife. I sat with the phone number in front of me for a long time, gathering my courage. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang 3 times before a man with a deep, calm voice answered. Arthur Vance speaking. Mr. Vance, I began, my voice unsteady. My name is Thomas Miller. I am sorry to bother you. I got your number from the owner of Gold Standard Jewelers. I believe you recently purchased a ring from him. A vintage gold wedding band. I purchased many rings, Mr. Miller, he said politely. Can you be more specific? It had a small diamond, I said, my heart starting to race. And an inscription on the inside. S and T forever. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yes, he said slowly. I do have that ring. It is a lovely, sentimental piece. The craftsmanship is simple but elegant. A piece from the late 70s, I believe. He was describing it perfectly. That ring belonged to my wife, I said, my voice thick with emotion. The S and T stand for Sarah and Thomas. It was sold without my knowledge or permission by my daughter-in-law after my wife passed away. Mr. Vance, I need to get it back. I will pay you whatever you want for it. Please. I held my breath, waiting for his response. He could have laughed. He could have told me it was not his problem. He could have demanded an exorbitant amount of money. Instead, he was silent for a moment. Then he said, Mr. Miller, that is a terrible story. I am an honest collector, not a ghoul. I have no interest in profiting from a family's tragedy. Of course you can have the ring back. Relief washed over me so intensely that I felt dizzy. I had to sit down. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you. I will sell it back to you for exactly what I paid for it, plus the small commission I paid the shop, he said, his voice businesslike but not unkind. It is not a small sum, I must warn you. Gold prices are high right now. He named a figure that made me catch my breath. It was a significant portion of my savings. It was far more than Jenna had received for it, I was sure. The collector was making his profit, as was his right. But the money did not matter. That is fine, I said without hesitation. I will pay it. When can I come and get it? We arranged to meet the next day at his office. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my armchair for a long time, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a blanket. I had done it. I had found the ring. Tomorrow I would hold it in my hand again. The first part of my plan was complete. Now I had to think about the second part. The confrontation. How could I make them understand the gravity of what they had done? How could I make them feel even a fraction of the pain and disrespect they had shown me? The next day, I drove to Arthur Vance's office with a bank check in my pocket. His office was in a sleek, modern building, a world away from the dusty pawn shop. He was a distinguished-looking man in a sharp suit, and he greeted me with a firm handshake and a sympathetic expression. He led me into a small, private room. On a black velvet tray in the center of the table was a single, familiar object. Sarah's ring. It looked so small, so unassuming. But seeing it there, safe and sound, made my eyes well up with tears. I reached out and touched it. It was real. It was here. It is a beautiful symbol of a long life together, Mr. Vance said softly. It deserves to be with its family. I gave him the check, and he gave me the ring. I slipped it into my pocket, the small weight of it a comforting presence. I thanked him again, more sincerely than I had ever thanked anyone in my life. He had been a stranger, but he had shown me more kindness and understanding than my own family. On the drive home, a new plan began to form in my mind. A simple confrontation was not enough. An argument in my living room would achieve nothing. They would cry, they would apologize, they would make excuses. And in a few weeks, everything would go back to the way it was. They would continue to see me as a relic, a problem to be managed. No, I needed to do something that they would never forget. I needed to show them, and everyone they knew, the truth of their character. The idea came to me when I got home and saw the mail on the table. It was a brightly colored envelope, an invitation. It was for a baby shower for Jenna. They were expecting their first child, a girl. The invitation was filled with cheerful pictures of baby blocks and teddy bears. The irony was so thick, so bitter, I almost laughed out loud. Jenna was celebrating the coming of her daughter, a celebration funded in part by the sale of a ring that should have been passed down to that very same daughter one day. And that is when I knew what I had to do. I would go to the baby shower. I would bring a gift. And I would wear Sarah's ring on my own hand, where everyone could see it. I would not say a word until she was forced to confront me. I would let her expose herself in front of all her friends and family. It was a cruel plan, perhaps. But what she had done was crueler. She had tried to erase a part of Sarah. I was going to make sure that Sarah's memory was front and center on Jenna's special day. I needed more than just the ring, though. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof of her intentions. I did not want a situation where it was just my word against her tearful, pregnant woman act. I needed something that would silence her completely. I started thinking about where I could find such proof. My mind went back to the weeks leading up to Sarah's passing. She had been weak, but her mind was still sharp. She spent a lot of time on her tablet, messaging friends and family. I found her old tablet in the drawer of her bedside table. I had not been able to bring myself to get rid of it. I plugged it in, and after a few moments, the screen flickered to life. Her messaging app was still open. I started scrolling through her old conversations. It felt like an invasion of her privacy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was necessary. I found a conversation between Sarah and Jenna from about a month before she died. Sarah was talking about her jewelry. She wrote, "I was just thinking about my wedding ring. It is not much, but it is the most precious thing I own. I want it to be a family heirloom. Maybe your daughter will wear it one day." Jenna's reply was short, almost dismissive. "That is nice, Sarah, just 3 words."
No worms, no prosciastion.
It was chilling to read. But the real bombshell was in another conversation. It was a thread between Jenna and her own mother. I scrolled back to the week after Sarah's funeral. My heart pounded as I read Jenna's words. "This house is so full of cluttered old junk," she had written to her mother. "It is going to take forever to clear it all out. But Tom said we could take anything we want. There are a few antique pieces that might be worth something." Her mother had replied, "Just be careful, honey. You do not want to look greedy." And then came the message that made my blood freeze. "Do not worry," Jenna had written. "I will be subtle. Her wedding ring is old-fashioned, but the gold is worth a pretty penny. It will be a nice down payment on the nursery furniture." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. There it was, in black and white. It was not a spur-of-the-moment decision born of financial desperation, as the pawn shop owner had been led to believe. It was a cold, calculated plan. She had seen my wife's most cherished possession as nothing more than a source of cash for her baby's room. The callousness of it was breathtaking. She had been planning this while I was still deep in the raw stages of my grief. I took screenshots of the entire conversation. I saved them to my phone. I backed them up to my computer. This was the weapon I needed. This was the proof that would leave her with no excuses, no room to lie. My plan was no longer just an idea. It was a certainty. I was going to that baby shower. And I was going to burn her world to the ground with the quiet, simple truth. In the days leading up to the shower, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but the frantic desperation was gone. I had a purpose. I had the ring safely tucked away. I had the proof on my phone. All I had to do was wait.
Mark called me a few days before the party.
"Hey, Dad," he said, his voice cheerful. "Just wanted to make sure you are still coming on Saturday. It means a lot to Jenna that you will be there." "I would not miss it for the world," I said, and the double meaning in my own words sent a chill down my spine. "Great," he said, oblivious. "It is going to be a lot of fun. Jenna has been working so hard on it." "I am sure she has," I said quietly. "I will see you on Saturday, son." I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the dark screen. I looked older. Grieving had aged me, but there was a look in my eyes that I had not seen before. It was a look of grim determination. I was no longer a victim of their deceit. I was the architect of their comeuppance. The day of the baby's shower arrived. It was a bright, sunny afternoon. I put on a nice shirt and a pair of slacks. I felt strangely detached, as if I were an actor about to go on stage to play a part. Before I left the house, I took out Sarah's ring. I looked at it for a long moment, the simple gold band gleaming in the light. Then, I carefully slid it onto my own pinky finger. It was a snug fit, but it was on. It felt heavy, not just with its own weight, but with the weight of everything it represented. 40 years of love, a lifetime of memories, and a betrayal so deep it had reshaped my world. I made a fist, the cool metal pressing into my skin. It was time. The shower was being held at a small, rented event hall that Jenna had decorated from top to bottom in pink and white. Balloons and streamers were everywhere. A large banner that read, "It's a girl," hung over a table laden with gifts. The room was filled with people, mostly Jenna's friends and family. I saw her mother, her aunts, her cousins, all smiling and laughing. They all saw her as this glowing, perfect mother-to-be. They had no idea who she really was. I found a seat in the corner, away from the main crowd. I wanted to observe. I wanted to see her in her element, surrounded by the people she had curated for her perfect life. Mark saw me and came over, a wide grin on his face.
Dad.
You made it, he said, giving me a quick, one-armed hug. Glad you are here. What do you think of the place? Jenna did an amazing job, right? It is very nice, Mark, I said, my voice neutral. I kept my left hand, the one with the ring, resting on my knee, in plain sight. Mark did not notice. He was too caught up in the excitement of the day. He went back to Jenna's side, beaming with pride. Jenna was the center of attention, of course. She sat in a large, throne-like chair, opening presents with exaggerated gasps of delight. Oh, it is perfect, she would exclaim over a tiny pair of shoes. I absolutely love it, she would gush over a fluffy pink blanket. I watched her, and I felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. Her happiness was built on a foundation of lies and disrespect. It was a house of cards, and I was about to pull out the one card that would make it all come tumbling down. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, patiently waiting. I sipped my punch and made small talk with a distant cousin of Jenna's who sat next to me. The pile of gifts grew larger. The laughter and chatter filled the room. And still, no one noticed the small gold band on my finger. Finally, the gift opening was over. Jenna stood up to thank everyone for coming. She placed a hand on her pregnant belly, a beatific smile on her face. Thank you all so much for being here, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Mark and I are just so overwhelmed with all your love and support. We cannot wait for our little girl to meet all of you. People applauded. Her mother wiped a tear from her eye. It was the perfect picture of a perfect family.
And it was all a lie.
As the party began to wind down, and people started to mingle again, Jenna began making her way around the room, thanking people individually. I saw her eyes scan the crowd, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she saw me. Before she saw the ring. She finally approached my corner, her smile firmly in place. Thomas, thank you so much for coming, she said, her voice sweet as sugar. It really means so much to us that you are here to celebrate with us. It is quite the celebration, Jenna, I said calmly. Her eyes flickered down to my hand, which was still resting on my knee. Her smile froze. Her eyes widened, just for a second, a flicker of pure shock and panic. She quickly composed herself, but I had seen it. She knew. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. What are you doing here? She hissed, her sweet facade completely gone. And what is that on your finger? The moment had arrived. The stage was set. It was time for the final act. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I looked her directly in the eye, and my heart is pounding but my voice is steady. I was invited, Jenna. I say calmly. This is my wife's wedding ring. Her face goes completely white. She looks like she has seen a ghost. Where did you get that? She whispers, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. I bought it back, I say, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I bought it back from the pawn shop you sold it to. I bought it back from the collector he sold it to after that. It was quite the journey. She stares at me, her mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. She looks around frantically, hoping no one is listening to our quiet, intense conversation. But it is too late. My son, Mark, has noticed the tense exchange and is walking over. Hey, what is going on over here? He asks, trying to keep his tone light. Dad, is everything okay? Jenna looks upset. I do not take my eyes off Jenna. Her perfect day is crumbling around her, and she knows it. You should ask your wife what is wrong, Mark, I say, my voice cutting through the cheerful party atmosphere. You should ask her where she got the money for all these expensive decorations. Ask her where she got the down payment for the new nursery furniture. Jenna finally finds her voice. She turns to Mark, her eyes filling with tears.
They are real tears this time. Tears of panic.
He is making things up, she cries, her voice rising in pitch. Mark, he is confused. He has been so lost since your mother died. He is not well. It is a desperate, pathetic attempt to discredit me, to paint me as a senile old man. But I am prepared for this. The pity in the room begins to shift towards me, but I do not want their pity. I want them to see the truth. I stand up slowly. I am not confused, Jenna. My voice is low, but it carries in the sudden silence of the room. Everyone is looking at us now. Her friends, her family, her mother. I am not confused at all, I say, and I pull out my phone. In fact, my memory is crystal clear. I remember everything. I even remember the messages you sent to your own mother a week after my wife died. The ones where you called her belongings junk. The ones where you talked about selling her old-fashioned ring for a pretty penny. I turn the phone screen towards Mark. His face is a canvas of confusion and disbelief. I press play on the screen recording I made of the messages, scrolling slowly through the conversation. He reads the words. I watch the color drain from his face. I watch his eyes widen in horror as he reads what his wife wrote, in her own words. The smug satisfaction she felt at her own cleverness, the utter contempt she had for his mother's memory, it is all there. Jenna is openly sobbing now, a horrible, gasping sound. Mark, no, it is not what it looks like, she pleads. I can explain. But her mother, who has come closer to see what is happening, also sees the phone screen. Her face turns ashen. She looks at her daughter, not with sympathy, but with a look of profound shame and disappointment. Mark finally looks up from the phone. He looks at me, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it shocks me. Then he turns to his wife. His voice is quiet, shaking with a rage I have never heard from him before. Did you do this? He asks. Did you sell my mother's ring? Jenna just stands there, her face streaked with tears, unable to answer. Her silence is a confession. It is all the confirmation he needs. The whole room is silent, watching this family drama unfold. The cheerful pink and white decorations suddenly seem mocking, a garish backdrop to a scene of utter devastation. Mark turns back to me. The anger in his face is gone, replaced by a look of crushing guilt and sorrow. Dad, he says, his voice breaking.
Dad.
I am so sorry. I just nod. I do not need to say anything else. My part is done. I have brought the truth into the light. The consequences are now theirs to deal with. I turn and walk away from the wreckage of their perfect party, the small, simple gold band on my finger feeling lighter than it has in months. As I walk out the door, I do not look back. The aftermath was quiet and swift. The baby shower ended abruptly after I left. Guests trickled out in awkward silence, whispering amongst themselves. They had come to celebrate a new life, and had instead witnessed the implosion of a marriage. The perfect image Jenna had so carefully crafted was shattered in an instant, replaced by the ugly truth of her greed and deceit. The next day, Jenna's mother called me. Her voice was strained, heavy with shame. Thomas, she began, I do not know what to say. I am so sorry. I had no idea. I swear to you, when she talked about selling old things, I never imagined she meant Sarah's ring. I am so ashamed of her. You should have taught your daughter the difference between value and price, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Some things are worth more than the money you can get for them. Sarah's ring was one of them. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You are right, she finally whispered. I have failed as a mother. I am so sorry for the pain she has caused you. I did not offer her forgiveness. It was not mine to give. Goodbye, I said and hung up the phone. Mark called a few hours later. He sounded broken. He cried. He begged for my forgiveness. He told me he had been weak and stupid, that he had let Jenna walk all over him, that he had failed me and his mother. He said he had not known. I believed him, to an extent. He had not known the specifics, perhaps, but he had known something was wrong. He had chosen to look away, to believe the easy lie instead of facing the uncomfortable truth. His weakness was as much a part of the betrayal as Jenna's actions. I am going to make her give back every cent, he sobbed. I am going to make her return all the nursery furniture. We will sell it all. I will give you the money back, Dad. I promise. The money is not the point, Mark, I told him, my voice tired. It was never about the money.
It was about respect.
It was about honoring your mother's memory. You failed her.
And you failed me.
You let your wife treat our family's history like it was trash to be sold off to the highest bidder. I know, he choked out. I know, Dad. What can I do to fix this? Nothing, I said honestly. You cannot fix this. The damage is done. I need space, Mark. I need time. Do not call me for a while. I hung up before he could say anything else. I felt a pang of sadness for my son, for the mess his life had become. But my sympathy was limited. He had made his choices. Now he had to live with them. I met my friend David for coffee a few days later. He had heard bits and pieces of what had happened from a mutual acquaintance who had been at the party. He listened intently as I filled in the details. Good Lord, Tom, he said when I had finished, shaking his head in disbelief. That is like a scene from a movie. I cannot believe you did that. How do you feel? It was a good question. I had spent so much time focused on my plan, on my anger, that I had not really stopped to think about how I felt now that it was all over. I thought for a moment. Empty, I said finally.
But clean.
Like I finally cleaned a wound that was festering. The anger is gone. The obsession with it is gone. It is just quiet now. And the ring, he asked. I have it, I said. It is in my pocket. I do not know what to do with it. The fallout for Mark and Jenna was severe. Their relationship, which I now realized was built on her control and his passivity, was shattered. Mark followed through on his promise. He made her return everything she had bought with the money. The fancy crib, the expensive stroller, the designer baby clothes. He told me they were in counseling, but the trust was gone. How could he ever look at her the same way again? How could he ever trust that her actions were not motivated by some hidden, selfish agenda? Her social circle was decimated. The story of what she had done spread like wildfire among her friends and family. The woman who had been the queen bee, the center of her social world, was now an outcast. People looked at her with pity and contempt. The public humiliation was a far greater punishment than anything I could have ever devised. She had built her entire identity around her public image, and I had destroyed it with a few simple, undeniable truths. A few weeks later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at the ring. It lay on the polished wood, gleaming under the light. I had it back. I had won, but the victory felt hollow. The peace I thought getting it back would bring was not quite there. The ring was no longer just a symbol of my love for Sarah. It was now also a symbol of betrayal, of lies, of a family torn apart. The memory was tainted, forever linked to this ugly chapter. I picked it up and held it in the palm of my hand. It was just a small circle of gold. But it had caused so much pain. It had revealed so much truth. I could not put it back in Sarah's jewelry box. That place felt too pure for it now. And I could not wear it. It did not belong to me. The next day, I went to the bank. I rented a small safe deposit box. I wrapped the ring in a piece of soft velvet cloth and placed it inside the cold, metal box. I locked it away. It was safe.
It was preserved.
But it was also removed, separate from my daily life. It was a piece of the past that I needed to put away in order to move forward. I do not see my son or his wife anymore. Mark sends me text messages sometimes, short, sad updates. The baby was born. A little girl. They named her Hope. Another bitter irony. He says Jenna is a good mother, but that things between them are still broken.
He says he misses me.
I do not reply. It is not out of spite. It is just that there is nothing left to say. The chasm between us is too wide to cross. I learned something through all of this. I learned that grief can make you vulnerable, but it can also make you strong. I learned that the truth is a powerful weapon, more powerful than anger or revenge. And I learned that some things have a value far beyond what you can get for them at a pawn shop. They finally learned that lesson, I think. They learned it the hard way. And I learned that sometimes getting justice does not fix the hole someone leaves behind. It just makes the silence a little easier to bear.